Hello, my name is Nathan, and I'm here once again to show you how to use AutoTransform. Today what we're going to be doing is we are going to be writing a schema from scratch um, and using it to make some changes to our code base, running it locally, and then setting it up on our schedule to run remotely. Uh, so if you haven't yet looked at it, I would suggest watching the video where I kind of show you how to get AutoTransform set up so that you can kind of get to the state that we're in right now in this repo, and then you can follow along from there. So let's actually start doing our thing. So the schema that we want to write today is a schema to format all of our JSON files using Prettier. So, similar to the black format schema that exists, um, this is the schema that comes as the sample with all of our uh, setup for adding auto transform to your repo. Um, but we don't want to use one that exists already. We want to write our own new one. So, first of all, we are going to add a new file to our schemas folder, and that file is going to be called prettier.json. And now we need to write the actual schema itself. Let's start with the config. So the config for our schema name is prettier. And we're also going to set owners as Nathro. So owners, the idea here is these are kind of the people who are responsible for maintaining your particular schema. You can either use owners or you could use team owners. Team owners representing teams in a system like GitHub. So you would have your team listed there, but I'm just going to list myself as an owner using the individual owner syntax. These can be used by things like actions in order to set owners as reviewers or things like that. So that's the config for our schema. Now, like I said, we want to get every file or every JSON file in our repo. So we're going to need an input here. Now, we don't have an input that says, hey, give me all the JSON files. So we're going to kind of have to get to the point where we have that. So from an input standpoint, we can just start by getting all the files. So our input is going to be the directory input. And the path that we use is just going to be dot, so the current working directory. So this is just going to give us every file within a particular directory, and when we use the current working directory, which will be the root of the repository, this will give us every file in the repository. Now, like I said, we're only going to be wanting to modify the JSON files in the repository, so we need to have some kind of filtering here. So we're going to have to add some filters. So first up, we need a filter so that we only get JSON files. That's simple enough, very similar to what we did with black. We use the regex filter, and we're going to use a pattern of dot star and then slash slash dot JSON dollar. Right, so this is just going to give us any file that ends with dot JSON. Now, you'll see here we have these node modules here for Prettier. I already set this up by just doing npm install Prettier. But these contain not just the JSON, not just the JavaScript files, but there's also these package lock files that installing Prettier has added to our repository. We do not want to run Prettier on these files because it causes all kinds of weird issues. And so what we're going to do is we're going to filter those files out by adding another filter. Once again, we can use a regex filter here. And we're going to look for files in the node modules directory. Right, we don't want to touch any of these. We'll actually escape that slash. So anything in node modules or anything that looks like a package file. So those would be package, and then it maybe has dash lock in it, dot JSON. So these are kind of the files that we're looking for here. Now you'll notice that this is specifically the files that we don't want, right? But the regex filter passes files that pass the regex. So what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to add another thing called inverted and set that to true. Inverted will invert the results of the filter. So anything that passes will now fail, and anything that fails will now pass. So this will let us filter these out. If I was better at regexes, I probably could write this regex to do it properly, but it's nice and simple to just invert it. So cool, we have our filters now. This should filter us down just to the stuff that we care about. Next up, we need to do some batching. So our batcher is going to look very, very similar, once again, to the one that we used for black. So we're going to use the single batcher. Again, no reason not to have all of our formatting done in a single PR. We are going to use the title of, say, format all JSON files. And then we're going to have some metadata here. And our metadata will do body, run npx prettier -w on all JSON files. And then we're going to also add reviewers here. So reviewers is something that will add a reviewer to your pull request. So we're going to add ourselves as a reviewer here. That sets up our batcher to do what we need. And now let's add our transformer. So what we need to do is we need to run a script. So we're going to use the script transformer. The script that we're running, whoops, I am failing miserably at typing, is npx. And the arguments that we're going to use to the npx script are prettier -w and then the file path. We'll use a timeout of 300 just to be a little different than the black format one. And like the black format, we do per item set to true. So this will, this is the prettier config that's owned by me. It'll get every file. It'll filter the ones that end with .json, and also filter out any files in the node modules directory or that end with package or package lock.json. And it'll batch these all into a single batch that has the title of format all JSON files, body of a pull request being run npx prettier -w on all JSON files, and it'll add myself as a reviewer. And then it'll run a script to generate the changes, the script being npx prettier -w, and then the file path with a timeout of 300 and per item set to true. Cool, so that's getting this whole thing set up. We're not going to add the repo yet because first we want to test and make sure everything works. So in order to do that, first we need to add it to our schema map. And we can just kind of copy this. It's going to be in the same place. It's just called prettier instead of black format. So that adds it to the schema map. Now let's stage these changes. Now the next step for us is to try running this. So we have the AutoTransform run command. And I'll show you the help menu here. You can kind of see that it has a few different options to it. The most important one is kind of telling it how to figure out how to translate the schema that you give it into an actual schema, right? So there are a few options here. You can give it a schema builder, name, and that will give you a particular schema builder, which is something we haven't talked about yet, but it's a way to programmatically generate a schema. You could give it a file path. You could give it the schema as a string. Just throw that in there. You could give it the name of an environment variable where the schema is stored as a string, or you can give it the actual name of the schema, and that's the one that we're going to go with. You can also choose to run using your local runner or your remote runner. But because we're testing this right now, we're going to just test this locally. So we're going to do AutoTransform. Let's do verbose so we can kind of see what's going on. Excuse me, AutoTransform run verbose. And we're going to use the name of the schema, and we want to run locally. And the schema's name that we're running is prettier. So let's run this and see what happens. I messed something up. What did I mess up? I think I made a mistake in my file somewhere. Oh, I never saved. Smart choice, by the way, when doing this. Save your changes. So we'll stage that, and then we will clear, and we will try again. And as you see, it's making a bunch of changes, and it did a bunch of stuff. It set up a bunch of different things. So you can see it's kind of adding like new lines and stuff. We're running prettier, right? It's doing the things that you kind of expect. So cool. Everything there works then. So we can discard these changes. We don't need them. And we can git commit -m add. Well, actually, before we do this, we'll want to now add the repo to this. So in order to do that, we will go to our prettier schema, and now it's time to add the repo. So the repo is going to be just basically the same thing that we had with black format, right? So we'll go just copy that over here, and that's name is GitHub, base branch is main, full GitHub name is Nathro/AutoTransform-test, right? So just getting that all nicely set up for us. Save that and add it and commit it. So we'll commit it as add prettier schema. And we can push this. So now we've added the prettier schema to our repo. Now let's test and make sure everything works when we're running remotely. Or not remotely, excuse me, when we actually run this with the repo. So we can just do, once again, AutoTransform run verbose name local prettier. Once again, running, doing its thing, making changes. We actually failed something here. Neither GitHub token nor GitHub JVT token was found. Give me a sec. I'm gonna look into this and see what's going on. As it turns out, there was a problem with my bash RC. It didn't have the right stuff in it. Given that it's touching like my token and stuff, I needed to make sure that was done outside of the recording. And there was also a very small bug in the current version of the alpha of AutoTransform where it's not able to add reviewers during the PR creation process. So I fixed the package that I have installed here, and I'm going to put up a fix. So you'll want to switch to 1.0.7 A4 instead of A3 once that's out, because that will fix this issue. I believe 1.0.7 A4 is the current best, current um, most recent version, but I can actually just check that really fast on PyPy. So AutoTransform on PyPy, the release history, yeah, 1.0.7a3 is the current latest release, but we will be using 1.0.7a4 once I have the fixes done for this and I put that out. So that's just some information for you. But we can continue now. So we can run our command here now, and it should work. And it's succeeded. It has created a PR for us. So to kind of run you through some of the output of this, it's listing all of the files that it found, and it's kind of outputting what the filters are doing to those files. You might have just heard my phone buzz because I got added as a reviewer for the PR. It's using these files, right, with these paths. The key is the path here. And it's saying that like this filter, this inverted filter, or this filter failed this file or whatever. And then we kind of get a list of here's all the valid files. It's going to do the batching. Here's all the batches that it's creating. And then here is it's going to clean the repo. It runs the script, and so here's all the output from running all the scripts commands. Checking for changes, found the changes, submitted them, and this is the pull request that I created, number 9. And then it rewound the repo and it finished the batch. And that was it. So if we go onto GitHub now, and we take a look at our pull requests, we will see that there is a AutoTransform Prettier pull request. You'll see that this is from the bot. I'm using the bot's token, though because it's coming from my machine, it's got my Git credentials are the ones behind the commit, so you can change that to have it come from a bot or whatever. But because it's coming from my machine, it's using my credentials for the actual commit itself. So the username and email associated with the commit is mine. Normally I would have this use my own GitHub token to create this pull request, but because I'm demonstrating adding me as a reviewer, I can't be added as a reviewer to my own pull request. So that's why there's that separation. And as you see, it's got me as a reviewer here. It's got the body that I added, and then there's some automatic stuff added by AutoTransform to the body of the pull request as well, talking about how to learn more about it, and the JSON of the schema, as well as the batch information in here. And if we go to the files, here we can see that it's made a few changes to our JSON files. And that's that. We've actually now successfully run AutoTransform and created some stuff. If we wanted to add this to our schedule, we would simply add another schema to this list, and we could do schema name prettier, and our schedule would be run daily, hour of day, run it at 7 a.m. as well, sure, why not? And now that's added there, we can actually, to test this out, to see that it works with our scheduler, we can set this to, I believe, 0. It's currently midnight, so we could set this to 0. So you see we're on main right now. Git add -a, git commit -m, add prettier to schedule. and push that. And then we can go back to this. Let's close this out so that we don't have it anymore. And then we can do actions, schedule. We actually don't have the ability to run this on workflow dispatch like I wanted. So what we can do is we can go back to this, add on workflow dispatch here, and add that to this one as well. Add workflow dispatch to schedule and manager. And one other thing that we're going to need to do, actually, there's no, we don't need to, we shouldn't need to, we do need to install npm. So what we're going to want to do here with these guys, actually, we might not need npm. It might come by default on the GitHub runners. So let's kind of test that and see what happens. So we can go to our actions. It seems like we messed something up here. We misspelled dispatch. Okay. Dispatch. Let's just get it from this one because this uses it, just to make sure it's correct. So for the manage and for the schedule, spell dispatch correctly. Add that change in. Now we should have these fixed, and we can run this workflow and see what happens. This is going a little bit beyond kind of what this is where we're now at the point where, how you get your stuff set up in your remote environment, which might not be perfectly set up here, but we're trying it out and making sure and seeing if it works. But that's where that stuff can come up. So we see here, this is running as hour 1. Okay, there, yeah, there's a issue here because it's confused by daylight savings time. And so I just need to change this in the scheduler to run on hour 1 now. And if I go to the scheduler and I run it again, should run. It's kind of doing its thing. And it triggered a run. Now that's kind of going off. So basically the scheduler, when it sees that a particular schema is supposed to be scheduled, it triggers a run workflow. So that's going off now. And hopefully that works just fine. Based on how long it's taking, it seems like it's not having a problem with NPM, which is great. I didn't test this before. None of the stuff that's happening in this video was tested before it was run. But yep, I see a pull request has shown up here. Though entertainingly, this failed somehow. Oh, this failed to add reviewer. Okay, so the secret that I have in here is my personal GitHub token rather than the bots. So that's why it's created as me, and it failed because it couldn't add me as a reviewer. This is something I changed when I was fixing the run earlier, was using the bots token instead of my personal token. But that's why that run failed. So that's just an issue with the how I have it set up. But um, as you can see, the schedule worked perfectly. It saw the thing was supposed to be scheduled, set off the run. The run created the PR as expected. So that's kind of how you end to end write it, something, test it, run it locally, and then eventually get it up here. You can even run management locally. So if you go into this and you see AutoTransform manage, right? There's a dash dash local option for manager, which will run your management locally. So if you create some PRs as yourself using AutoTransform and you would like to use AutoTransform's management functionality to manage them for you, you can run AutoTransform manage to do that. AutoTransform manage dash dash local to do that. And that way you don't have to deal with the bot's credentials or anything like that. You can actually have it run against your own PRs, and it will only get PRs that have AutoTransform as like the branch names will start with. I'll show you actually the branch here. Because we ran it locally, we created a branch, and it starts with auto underscore transform, all caps, as the start of the name of the branch, and then double underscore prettier, so the name of the schema, and then double underscore the title of the batch. And we kind of get rid of a bunch of stuff like slashes and whatnot that aren't valid to include in a branch name. So that gets us all nice and set up here. Future Nathan here. One thing that I wanted to include in this video that I forgot when recording it is the documentation for AutoTransform. You can reach the documentation by going to autotransform.readthedocs.io. That's where our docs are located, and I specifically wanted to call this out because if you go to the code and then AutoTransform schema components, this is a list of all of the different schema components that exist in the base version of AutoTransform. So your directory inputs, empty inputs, git grep, inline inputs, a bunch of different stuff in here. And that kind of goes over all the different pieces of AutoTransform that you can use to stitch together and construct your schemas. On top of the components that exist by default, if you go to the extending for your organization, there is this idea of custom components where you can write your own components and import them into AutoTransform. And this kind of gives you a rundown of how to do that, as well as more information on remote runs and the value of branch protection rules, configuration, all that type of stuff. These documents are detailed and in depth on a bunch of different aspects of running AutoTransform, what different components represent, different best practices that you should follow when using AutoTransform, things like that. So I wanted to plug this and suggest going here for further learning. Thank you for watching this video. Again, sorry for stepping in and plugging this in the middle of the recording, but I will pass you back to Past Nathan. But yeah, that's kind of how that whole thing is set up. Thank you for watching and listening. Sorry for some of the stuff not working as expected, but that should hopefully get you started on learning AutoTransform. Have a wonderful day.